Close your eyes for a moment. Forget the movies. Forget the memes. Forget everything you think you know about gladiators. Now, imagine this instead. You're standing in the center of a stone arena. 50,000 people are staring down at you. The sun is a burning coin in the sky. The sand under your feet is already stained dark with someone else's blood. You are a slave. You have no last name, no rights, no future. And yet, the entire Roman Empire has come to watch you. Not because they care about you, but because they want a show. If you die well, they cheer. If you die badly, they boo. If you somehow survive, they send you back into the dark to wait for the next fight. For most men, that's the end of the story. The arena swallows them. Rome forgets them. But once, just once, a gladiator looked up at those marble seats, at those polished senators, at that perfect golden eagle of Rome, and thought, what if the sand is not the only place I can stand? His name was Spartacus, born free, broken in chains, trained to kill for entertainment. Instead, he became something Rome never planned for, a problem, a leader, the spark of the greatest slave rebellion the ancient world had ever seen. This isn't the Hollywood version. This isn't slow-motion swords and perfect speeches. This is the real story of a man who took everything Rome used to control him, its discipline, its tactics, its fear, and turned it back against the empire. And before we're done tonight, you may realize something uncomfortable. The arenas never truly disappeared. They just changed shape. This is the true history of Spartacus, the gladiator who made Rome tremble, and the echo of his rebellion that still lives inside us today. Before Spartacus, before the crosses on the Appian Way, before the world learned to fear a slave with a sword, there was something else, a different people, a different faith, a darker understanding of blood and honor. If you want to understand why men learned to die for the crowd, you have to go back, not to Rome, but to the lands north of it, to a civilization older than the empire, to funerals lit by torchlight, to warriors sent into the next world on a tide of sacrifice. This is where the story truly begins. The wind of the arena carries more than the smell of blood. It carries stories of men who came here as slaves and left as legends. The camera pans across the desert plains of Thrace. A chain of captives walks beneath the sun, their backs whipped raw, their eyes hollow. Among them is one man whose gaze refuses to die. His name is Spartacus. He was once a soldier, a fighter for his tribe. But when Rome came, it didn't just conquer his land, it stole his freedom. Shackled, branded, and sold like livestock, he was dragged into the beating heart of the empire. To the Romans, he was nothing more than property. To himself, he was still a man. They can cage my body, he thinks, but not my will. Cut to the gates of Capua, the great gladiator school, the Ludus of Batiatus. Inside, hundreds of men train for one purpose only: to die beautifully for the entertainment of others. The sound of iron, grunts, and lashes fills the air like a dark symphony. Every sunrise is a reminder. Freedom is not for them. Spartacus watches a fight in the pit, a man begging for mercy, the crowd roaring for blood. The trainer yells, "No mercy for the fallen!" The sword strikes, the sand drinks deep, and for a brief moment, the crowd feels like gods. But as the body falls, Spartacus looks away. He feels something breaking inside him, not fear, but disgust. If this is Rome's glory, then I want no part of it. Days blur into nights. They feed him scraps, make him fight in practice rings. He learns quickly, not because he loves the sword, but because he refuses to die meaningless. In his eyes, every bruise, every drop of blood is a reminder. I am still alive. The older gladiator beside him, Varro, laughs softly. Don't look so serious, Thracian. Here, pain is just another kind of lesson. Spartacus answers, then what's the reward? Varro smiles sadly. You get to survive another day. The camera lingers on Spartacus's face. Calm, but burning. The kind of calm that only exists right before a storm. Then comes the day of his first real match. The gate creaks open. The sun blinds him. He steps into the arena for the first time. Tens of thousands scream. Drums pound. The emperor's voice echoes, "Let the games begin." A man in armor charges at him, blade raised high. Spartacus blocks, slips, counters. Pure instinct. The crowd roars as he drives the sword through his opponent's chest. The sand darkens with blood. For a heartbeat, everything falls silent. Spartacus stares at what he's done. He's alive, but something inside him feels hollow. Around him, the crowd shouts his name, Spartacus, Spartacus! But to him, it sounds like a curse. If this is what they call glory, I'd rather die a free man. The camera tilts upward, showing the arena walls towering above him like the ribs of a great beast. The music swells with low drums and the whisper of chains. Somewhere deep inside, the first spark flickers. A spark that will one day ignite the greatest rebellion the world has ever known. The first time Spartacus returns from the arena alive, the others stare at him like he's a ghost. Some look at him with respect, some with envy, some with the cold calculation of men who know one simple truth. Every man who survives is one more rival they might face tomorrow. The guards shove him back through the iron gate and into the cool darkness of the Ludus. The roar of the crowd fades into a low, distant hum. Here, there are no cheers, only chains. The corridor smells of sweat, oil, and old blood. Torches flicker against stone walls scratched with marks. Tallies counting fights, victories, and names. Some of those names have been crossed out. Spartacus doesn't need anyone to explain what that means. In the cells, men press against the bars to see him. That's him, the Thracian. He killed his first opponent in one bout. Maybe he'll be dead by the third. Spartacus ignores them. He's still seeing the face of the man he killed. Not as an enemy, not as a monster, just a man. Inside his cell, he sinks onto the stone bench. His hands tremble, not from fear, but from something worse. Realization. This is his life now. This is his world. Bars, sand, blood. Repeat. A tin cup slides across the floor and bumps his boot. Varro leans against the wall of the neighboring cell, grinning. His brown hair is matted, his nose slightly crooked from a break that never healed quite right. Congratulations, Varro says. You didn't die. Spartacus glances over. It didn't feel like a victory. You walked back in here. That's victory enough in this place. Spartacus drinks. The water is warm, metallic, but it cuts through the dust in his throat. How many fights have you had? He asks. Varro shrugs. Enough to know this place never runs out of ways to hurt you. Not enough to buy my freedom. The word freedom hangs between them like something dangerous. In the days that follow, Spartacus learns the true rhythm of the Ludus. Mornings begin before sunrise, at the bark of the doctor, the head trainer. A scar runs from the man's temple to his jaw, a souvenir from a career in the arena. His voice is gravel and command. On your feet, dogs! Rome does not pay for you to sleep. They march to the training yard, an open space of packed dirt surrounded by a ring of columns. Wooden swords and shields lean against racks. Straw dummies stand in neat rows, already slashed and pierced by 1,000 blows. Training is relentless. They swing until their shoulders burn. They block until their arms go numb. They run, drill, and repeat until the line between exhaustion and survival blurs. The Doctore walks among them, correcting stances, barking orders. Spartacus, shield higher. Your ribs are not a gift for your enemy. Crixus, you move like a drunk ox. Footwork, again. Crixus is everything Spartacus is not. Gaul, broad-shouldered, all muscle and anger. Where Spartacus fights with calculation, Crixus fights with rage. To him, the arena is not just a prison, it's a stage. He shoulders past Spartacus during a drill. Stay out of my way, Thracian. The crowd only has room to love one champion. Spartacus doesn't respond, but he registers the word. Champion. Even here, men are chasing glory. At midday, they eat in a long, low hall. Bowls of barley stew, bread and beans. It's not much, but compared to starvation in the mines or fields, it's almost generous. Rome feeds its beasts well, before it sends them to slaughter. The men talk in low voices over their food. Some joke, pretending this is just another kind of barracks. Others sit in silence, counting in their heads how many fights they have left before their luck runs out. Spartacus listens more than he speaks. He learns where they came from. Gaul, Numidia, Syria, Greece, tribes and nations that once stood proud, now reduced to numbers on a roster. Bodies in a roster of entertainment. You still think about home? Varro asks him one night. Spartacus stares up at the ceiling, tracing cracks in the stone with his eyes. Every time I close my eyes. I used to, Varro says softly. Now I think about my wife, my boy. If I can win enough bouts, I can buy their future. That is the only thing that makes this place bearable. Spartacus turns to him. You believe Rome keeps its promises? Varro shrugs. I don't trust Rome, but I trust silver. Enough of it, and even a slave can bend the rules. In that moment, Spartacus understands. Not every man here fights for the same thing. Some fight for money, some for glory, some for the simple, stubborn refusal to die. He hasn't decided yet. At night, when the torches are dim and the Ludus quiets, Spartacus hears other sounds, the distant roar of the city, laughter from the villa where their owner drinks wine and counts profit, the murmur of prayers whispered to gods who rarely answer. One evening, as the moonlight spills through the high windows, Spartacus notices something carved into the wall beside his bed. A name, faded, almost erased by time. Gaius, 7 fights, 6 victories. Beneath it, another hand had scratched a final line. Died on his feet. Spartacus runs his fingers over the rough letters. In this place, that's the closest thing a man has to a gravestone. The Ludus is a factory that forges killers. But it's also something else. A mirror. It shows every man who he really is when the crowd is screaming and the sword is at his throat. Spartacus can feel it, day by day. The chains on his wrists. The weight of the wooden sword in his hand. The eyes of Rome watching from above the arena walls. They want him to become an animal. They want him to forget he was ever anything else. But every time he lifts his sword, every time he hears the Doctore shout, every time Crixus sneers or Varro laughs, something inside Spartacus hardens, not into hatred, into resolve. Because if he is trapped in the arena of chains, then one day, those chains will break. And when they do, Rome will finally remember that the men it calls slaves are still capable of drawing blood. Morning breaks over Capua, and the Ludus awakens like a beast shaking off sleep. Chains rattle. Men groan. The smell of dust, sweat, and iron thickens the air. Somewhere, a whip cracks, and silence follows. Spartacus rises with the others. His body aches. Muscles bruised and raw from the day before. But pain has already become part of the rhythm here. Another beat in Rome's cruel symphony. The doctor stalks the yard, eyes like blades. "Strength is nothing without obedience," he growls. "In the arena, hesitation is death. Out there, you are not men, you are spectacle." He tosses Spartacus a wooden sword. The weight is wrong, the balance off, but that's the point. It's meant to test, not to kill. They train under a burning sun. Strike, block, spin. Again. The sound of impact echoes like thunder. Wood smashing against shields, men shouting in pain and defiance. Dust rises, covering their skin like a second layer of armor. The doctore moves among them, correcting forms with a lash instead of words. Spartacus takes his hits without flinching. Not out of pride, but focus. Every cut, every bruise is a teacher. Crixus sneers as he passes. "Still fighting like a soldier, Thracian. You'll die trying to play by your old rules." Spartacus doesn't look at him. "Better a dead man than Rome's dog." Crixus smirks. "Then die quick. Rome loves a good show." Their eyes lock, a silent promise that one day the sand will decide between them. At midday, Spartacus trains alone. He mimics the moves of others, studies their stances, watches how they shift their weight. Rome wants him to be an animal. Instead, he learns to be a weapon. The doctore notices. "You learn fast," he says quietly. Spartacus nods. "I've had good teachers, mostly pain." The doctor studies him for a moment. There's something almost human in his gaze, before it hardens again. Pain is a language every man here must learn to speak fluently. Later that week, they're called to the pit for a demonstration. A new recruit, a boy barely 20, stands trembling as two guards throw him a dull sword. "Your opponent," says the doctor, pointing to a hulking veteran with scars running down his chest, "will teach you what mercy costs in Rome." The fight lasts seconds. One strike, one scream, one life gone. The crowd of trainees goes silent. The doctore doesn't blink. "That," he says coldly, "is Rome. Learn fast, or join him." Spartacus feels something twist inside. He's seen war before, but never this. This isn't battle. It's theater. Death as entertainment. Pain as profit. He looks up at the balcony where Batiatus, their master, watches with lazy interest. His robe gleams white against the blood below. He claps once. "Promising start. Train them well, doctore. Rome is hungry this season." And then he's gone, leaving the stench of wine and arrogance behind. Night falls. Spartacus can't sleep. He sits against the wall, tracing scars on his wrists where the shackles have rubbed his skin raw. Across the hall, Varro hums softly, a tune from a world that feels impossibly far away. "Can't rest?" Varro asks. "My body sleeps," Spartacus replies. "My mind won't." "You'll learn. Out there, thinking too much gets you killed." "Then I'll think harder," Spartacus says quietly. Varro chuckles. "You really believe you can outthink Rome?" "I don't need to outthink it," Spartacus answers. "Just survive long enough to break it." The words hang heavy in the air. It's the first time he's spoken that thought aloud, and Varro doesn't laugh this time. The next day, they're taken to the arena again, not to fight, but to watch. The sun burns overhead as two champions clash. Crixus is one of them. His movements are brutal, efficient, almost beautiful in their savagery. The crowd loves him. "See him," the Doctore says beside Spartacus. "He kills not for hate, but for rhythm. That's why Rome cheers his name." Spartacus studies Crixus, the flow of muscle and motion, the precision of each strike. He realizes that even Rome's cruelty follows rules, and rules can be learned, twisted, turned back against their masters. When Crixus wins, he lifts his sword to the stands, blood running down his arm. The crowd explodes, but Spartacus doesn't cheer. He doesn't see glory. He sees opportunity. That night, Spartacus begins his own ritual. When the others sleep, he trains silently. Footwork, breath control, precision. Each move is a rebellion in miniature, a way of reclaiming control over his own body. He whispers to himself, "They want a beast? I'll give them one, but not the kind they expect." The moonlight glints off his chains as he moves, slow, deliberate, almost graceful. The chains don't hinder him anymore. They dance with him. By the end of the week, even the Doctor can't ignore the change. "You fight differently now," he says. "No," Spartacus replies. "I fight for something different." The Doctor narrows his eyes. "Be careful, Thracian. Rome doesn't like men who remember what they are." Spartacus meets his gaze, steady and unflinching. "Then Rome should learn to be afraid." The Doctor doesn't answer. He just walks away, expression unreadable. But as he disappears into the shadows, a faint smile flickers across his scarred face. Half warning, half respect. In the heart of the Ludus, surrounded by walls meant to break men, something else is being forged. Not a killer, not a slave, a leader. The kind of man who will one day make Rome tremble. The day feels different. Even before the gates open, there's a charge in the air, like the sky itself is holding its breath. The guards move with more urgency. The slaves scrub the arena floor twice instead of once. From outside, the roar of the crowd isn't a distant hum anymore. It's a living thing, pressing against the walls. Spartacus stands with the others in the holding tunnel, armor strapped to his chest, helmet under his arm. The weight of the sword at his side is strangely familiar now. Too familiar. Varro leans against the wall, rolling his shoulders. "You ready for this?" "We've fought before," Spartacus replies. "Not like this," Varro says. "Today isn't about survival. Today is about introduction." Up above, trumpets sound, bright, brash, merciless. The Doctor steps into the torchlight, his eyes sweeping over the line of men. "Listen well," he says. "Today, you are not prisoners. You are not slaves. You are the fire Rome has paid to see. Give them ashes, and they will forget you. Give them flame, and they will remember your name." His gaze stops on Spartacus. "Thracian, today, Rome learns who you are." The words should feel like an honor. Instead, they feel like a sentence. The gate ahead begins to rise. Light floods in, a burning white glare that makes Spartacus squint. The smell hits him next. Sweat, dust, wine, oil, and the sharp copper tang of old blood baked into the sand. He steps out. The arena stretches before him, impossibly wide. The seats are a ring of shouting faces, a living wall of noise. Above them, in the shade of the podium, local nobles recline in comfort, safe from the sun and the consequences. Spartacus feels his heartbeat slow, not speed up. Training has taught his body what to do. It's his mind that's rebelling. On the far side, his opponent emerges. A big man, older, scars crossing his chest, a jagged line over his right eye. A veteran. The kind of fighter who's seen more battles than most men see sunrises. The crowd knows him. They chant his name. Drusus! 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 Drusus lifts his sword in acknowledgement, then looks at Spartacus. His eyes are tired, not cruel. He walks forward until they're close enough to hear each other over the storm of the crowd. First real match? Drusus asks quietly. You can tell? Everyone remembers their first, Drusus says. For what it's worth, I don't want to kill you. Spartacus studies him. Then, don't. Drusus gives a humorless half-smile. Rome doesn't pay us to be kind, Thracian. They pay us to be final. The referee steps between them, raising his staff. Trumpets blare again. On my mark! Begin! The staff drops. Drusus moves faster than his size should allow. His sword comes in a hard arc toward Spartacus's head. Clang! Spartacus barely gets his shield up in time. The impact rattles his bones. He staggers, boots slipping in the sand. Drusus presses, a relentless rhythm of strikes. High, low, feint, thrust. Spartacus gives ground, blocking, absorbing, learning. He's testing me, Spartacus realizes, seeing if I belong here. A cut sneaks through, slashing across Spartacus's thigh. Not deep, but enough to burn. The crowd roars at the sight of first blood. Drusus backs off a step, chest heaving. You're quick, he says. Use it, or this ends badly for both of us. Spartacus adjusts his stance. The pain in his leg sharpens his focus. He thinks of the boy in the pit, cut down without a chance. Of the man he killed by reflex in his first chaotic match. Of the chains on his wrists, the names scratched into stone. Died on his feet. He decides, if he must fight, he will fight with intent. The next exchange is different. Spartacus isn't just reacting now, he anticipates. Drusus's shoulder twitches. Spartacus is already shifting. The sword dips. Spartacus is already moving. He sidesteps a heavy swing and slams his shield into Drusus's ribs. The older man grunts, stumbles, sand spraying beneath his feet. The crowd's roar shifts, new, curious. Spartacus! Spartacus! The sound hits him like a blow. They don't know him. They don't care about him. They cheer the shape of the fight, not the soul inside it. Drusus comes again, but this time Spartacus is ready. He parries, pivots, and drives his sword into Drusus's shoulder. Not fatal, but decisive. Drusus drops to one knee, sword hand trembling. Blood runs down his arm, dripping onto the sand. He looks up at Spartacus, breathing hard. You've got them now, he rasps. End it! Spartacus hesitates. Behind him, the chant grows fractured. Kill him! Spare him! He can feel tens of thousands of eyes on his back. But the only eyes that matter are the ones in front of him, Drusus's eyes. This man is not Rome. He's just another prisoner, another body thrown into the fire. Spartacus raises his sword, then stops. He lifts his free hand instead, a small, deliberate gesture. Mercy! The crowd doesn't like that. Boos mix with cheers. Some throw scraps into the arena. The noise becomes chaos, a storm without direction. Up on the podium, the sponsor of the games rises from his cushioned seat. He considers the scene, a young newcomer standing over a veteran, daring to ask for mercy. After a long moment, he gives a tiny, bored flick of the wrist. Thumb. Down. The signal is clear. Drusus knows. He grimaces, not in fear, but in bitter acceptance. Rome has spoken, he says. Don't make them say it twice. Spartacus feels something shatter. If he refuses, they'll send in archers. They'll kill them both. They'll make it messy, painful, an example. Rome doesn't just demand blood. It demands obedience. His hand shakes as he raises the sword again. Drusus straightens as best he can, exposing his throat. His voice is calm. Look at me, Thracian. Don't look at them. A warrior deserves to die in the eyes of another warrior, not as a toy for a crowd. Their gazes lock. For a heartbeat, the arena falls away. There is no Rome, no sand, no screaming faces. Just two men, both condemned, sharing the last honest moment left to them. Spartacus whispers, so only Drusus can hear, I'm sorry. Drusus gives the faintest nod. Then, make it quick. The blade flashes. The crowd erupts. Blood spills hot across Spartacus's hands, down the sword, into the sand. Drusus collapses, eyes still open, staring at a sky that never once looked back. Spartacus remains standing over him, chest heaving, ears filled with the roar of people who will forget this man by tomorrow. Inside, something hardens. This is his first true kill. Not a reflex, not an accident, but a choice forced upon him by a machine that feeds on lives. He lifts his sword, because that's what they expect. The crowd screams his name again. Spartacus! Spartacus! But in his mind, the chant sounds different. Remember. Remember this. Remember him. Remember what Rome turned you into. As he walks back through the gate into the shadows of the Ludus, Spartacus understands a new truth. The arena doesn't just break bodies, it tries to break souls. And from this day on, he swears one thing. If he ever raises a sword again, it won't be for Rome. It will be against it. The night after Drusus dies, the Ludus is quieter than usual. Men still talk, still laugh, still curse the guards under their breath. But there's a weight in the air, like smoke that doesn't rise. Everyone felt it, the way Drusus died, the way the crowd roared, the way the new Thracian walked back through the gate with blood on his hands and fire in his eyes. Spartacus sits on the edge of his bunk, staring at his fingers. No matter how many times he washes them, he still feels the warmth of Drusus's blood. Varro slides onto the bench opposite, a bowl of thin stew in hand. You fought well today, he says. He died well, Spartacus answers. I just held the sword. Varro studies him for a long moment. That's how this place works. One lives, one doesn't. You can't carry every ghost. Maybe not, Spartacus says quietly. But I won't forget their faces. Across the hall, Crixus is surrounded by other gladiators. They're replaying his last bout, miming blows, laughing at his arrogance, admiring his skill. Crixus catches Spartacus looking and smirks. Enjoy your first kill, Thracian? He calls out. No, Spartacus replies. That's your mistake, Crixus says. You hesitate, you break. You break, you die. Some of the men nod. Others look away. They all know he's not completely wrong. But Spartacus isn't trying to win the argument. He's trying to hold on to something Crixus already surrendered. A few days later, the Ludus gathers in a small enclosed courtyard behind the training grounds. No armor, no weapons, just men. A shallow pit has been dug. At its edge rests a simple wooden marker with a name burned into it. Drusus. A handful of gladiators stand around the grave. Not many. Rome doesn't weep for the dead, and most of the Ludus can't afford the luxury. But those who fought alongside Drusus, they came. Varro nudges Spartacus forward. "You should be here," he says. "You were there at the end." One of the older fighters, scarred, gray at the temples, steps up and speaks first. Drusus of Numidia, 12 fights, 9 victories, 3 spared, died on his knees, but not in fear. He pours a small cup of wine into the pit. Another gladiator follows, dropping in a piece of bread. Small offerings, tiny rebellions against the idea that men like them die and vanish without a trace. A few eyes turn to Spartacus. He realizes they're waiting. He takes a breath. "He didn't beg," Spartacus says. His voice is rough, but steady. He knew what Rome had decided. He chose to face it like a man, not a toy for their amusement. He looks at the marker, then at the faces around him. If the gods care at all, let them remember that part. There's a murmur of agreement, a few nods. It isn't much, but it's something. As the gathering breaks apart, an older gladiator with a missing ear approaches Spartacus. "We don't all get this," he says, gesturing to the fresh grave. A name, a hole in the ground, a few words. Most just disappear into the sand. You helped make sure Drusus didn't. He rests a rough hand on Spartacus's shoulder. "You're one of us now." In the days that follow, Spartacus starts to notice things he missed before. The way men save crusts of bread to share with an injured comrade. The way they quietly swap shifts when someone is too battered to train. The way laughter becomes armor, loud, reckless, necessary. This place is a cage, but inside the cage, something like family has formed. Not a gentle, soft kind of family, but a brotherhood hammered together in pain and fear and stubborn survival. One evening, after a brutal day in the yard, Spartacus limps back to his cell. His thigh wound aches, reopened during drills. He sits, gritting his teeth, trying to wrap it with torn cloth. A shadow falls across his door. Crixus. For a moment, Spartacus thinks he's here to gloat. Instead, the Gaul tosses a small clay jar onto the bench. "For the leg," Crixus says. Spartacus frowns. "Poison," Crixus snorts. "Oil and herbs. The doctor gave it to me years ago. Said it helps the skin knit faster." Spartacus opens the jar. The smell is sharp and earthy. "Why give it to me?" Crixus leans against the bars, arms crossed. "Because if you go into the arena half-broken, you insult the man they put in front of you. And you insult the crowd. I don't share a sandpit with cowards or cripples. It's not kindness. Not exactly. But it's not hatred either." Spartacus nods once. "Then I'll be ready." "You'd better be," Crixus says, pushing off the bars. "If Rome loves you more than me, I'll be the one cutting you down." He leaves. Spartacus applies the salve, feeling the sting, then the slow, soothing burn. Even rivalry here is twisted into something useful. Enemies and allies blur. They all share the same chains, the same fate. That night, the doctor gathers a select group in the yard under torchlight. Spartacus, Varro, Crixus, and a few others. "You are not like the rest," he says. "Rome will not waste you on warm-up bouts and forgettable deaths. You are the ones they will remember, the ones they will bet on, the ones they will curse or adore." He walks slowly in front of them. "That means you are valuable. To Rome, to Batiatus, to me." He stops, looking each of them in the eyes. And whether you admit it or not, you are valuable to each other, because the man beside you today might be the only one watching your back tomorrow. He drops a wooden practice sword at Spartacus's feet. Again, he says, but this time not alone. Crixus steps forward, taking his stance opposite Spartacus. Varro moves to the side, watching angles, calling out mistakes. Another man guards Spartacus's blind spot. They move as individuals at first, colliding, tripping over each other's instincts. But slowly, a rhythm forms. Spartacus blocks high while Crixus counters low. Varro redirects an imaginary threat toward Spartacus's sword. The doctor watches, expression unreadable. Killers die, he says quietly. Teams survive. By the time the torches burn low, Spartacus is exhausted. But something has shifted. In the heat of training, in the clash of wood and sweat and curses, they stopped being just men thrown together by fate. They became a unit. Later, as they sit catching their breath, Varro nudges Spartacus with his shoulder. You know what they call us out there? Slaves, animals, entertainment. No, Varro says, they call us a familia. A family? Spartacus gives a small, tired smile. Strange word for people who might have to kill each other. Varro shrugs. In Rome, a lot of families are like that. They both laugh, and for a moment, the sound isn't bitter. It's real. In this world, brotherhood doesn't mean safety. It doesn't mean peace. But it means something else. When you fall, someone remembers your name. When you bleed, someone tries to stop it. When you stand in the sand, sword drawn and heart pounding, you know, somewhere in the shadows of the tunnel, someone is hoping you make it back. In a place built to break men apart, Spartacus has found the one thing Rome never intended to give him. Not freedom, not yet, but belonging. And that, he realizes, is a weapon just as powerful as any sword. It starts with a rumor. Whispers passed in the dark, traded over bowls of thin stew and under the crack of the whip. They say Batiatus cheated a man out of his freedom. They say a gladiator earned the wooden sword and never saw it. Spartacus doesn't pay attention at first. In Rome, lies travel faster than truth. But the story keeps coming back, the details sharpening each time. A veteran, 10 years in the arena, dozens of victories, promised his release. Instead, he accidentally dies in a fight he should have survived. One evening, as the sun bleeds into the horizon, Spartacus finds the doctor alone in the yard, examining a cracked shield. "Is it true?" Spartacus asks. The doctor doesn't look up. "Many things are true. You'll have to be more specific. A man here fought for freedom. Batiatus promised it. Rome cheered for it. Then he died, before he could touch it." The doctor runs a thumb along the broken edge of the shield. "You think Rome cares what it promises a slave?" Spartacus steps closer. "You told us to fight for survival. Varro fights for his family. Others fight for glory. But if freedom is just another trick..." The doctore finally looks at him. There's something in his eyes Spartacus has never seen before. Tired honesty. "Listen to me, Thracian. Rome's word is stone to those born under its eagle. To the rest of us..." He drops the shield. It hits the ground with a dull, empty clang. To the rest of us, it's smoke. Spartacus feels the words hit harder than any sword. If freedom is not a destination, then this isn't a path. It's a cage with moving walls. A week later, the spark becomes a flame. It's a rest day. No fights scheduled, no blood ordered. The men are in the yard, some gambling with scratched stones, others stretching sore limbs. Varro and Spartacus sit in what little shade there is, backs against warm stone. "2 more good bouts," Varro says, "and I'll have enough to send home. My boy will never see the inside of a mine. That's worth every scar." Spartacus watches a guard shove a younger slave to the ground for moving too slowly. "And after that?" he asks. "After?" Varro smiles. "Maybe I buy my own freedom. Stand outside these walls and watch them crumble without me." Spartacus wants to believe that future exists, wants to believe Rome can be beaten with its own rules. Then the gates slam open. A group of new slaves is shoved in. Farmers, laborers, a few who still wear the remnants of soldier sandals. Among them is a man with eyes like steel and a broken nose that's been set badly. Chains rattle around his wrists. He looks around the yard, taking everything in, the walls, the guards, the men. His jaw tightens. A guard shoves him hard. "Move, animal!" The man turns, slow and deliberate. "I am not your animal," he says. The words are calm, dangerous. The guard raises his whip. Before it falls, the man jerks his chain and drives his forehead into the guard's face. Bone cracks. The guard screams, dropping to his knees, blood pouring from his nose. For a heartbeat, the yard freezes. Then chaos erupts. Guards rush in. One cracks the man behind the knees with a staff. Another stomps on his back. A third pounds his ribs with a club until he coughs blood. Spartacus takes a step forward. Varro grabs his arm. "Don't!" Varro hisses. "You can't help him." "He's just standing up," Spartacus snaps. "Exactly. And you see what Rome does to men who stand up." The man is dragged to the center of the yard, barely conscious. Gladiator appears on the balcony above, robe immaculate, wine cup in hand. "What is this?" he demands. A guard bows. "New slave, Dominus," refuses to obey. Gladiator sighs theatrically, as if someone has spilled wine on his favorite cushion. "We are not savages here," he says loudly so everyone can hear. "We are businessmen. Discipline must be educational." He nods to the doctor. "Make an example of him." The doctor's jaw tightens, but he nods. Duty over feeling. Rome has taught him that well. The man is strung up on a post, arms stretched above him, feet barely touching the ground. A whip is handed to the doctor. The first strike lands with a sound that seems to cut the air in half. Flesh splits, red blooms. The man grunts, but doesn't scream. Spartacus flinches. Varro stares at the ground. Even Crixus looks away after the third lash. By the fifth, the skin on the man's back is a ruin. By the 10th, blood runs down his legs. "Yield," the doctor says under his breath, so quiet only the few closest can hear. "Say you submit, and I can stop." The man lifts his head. His voice is hoarse, broken, but still sharp. "I submit to no one." The 11th lash lands harder. So does the 12th. But Tiatus watches, bored. By the 15th, he waves a hand. "Enough. I don't want him dead. Yet. A broken dog is still useful." The man is cut down, collapsing to his knees. 2 slaves drag him away. The yard slowly exhales. Later, as night falls, Spartacus finds him in the infirmary. Bandaged, barely conscious, breath shallow. The doctor slaves move around them, but there are too many wounds and not enough hands. Spartacus sits beside the cot. "You could have bowed," he says quietly. "You'd have fewer scars." The man opens one eye, the ghost of a smile on his cracked lips. "If I start bowing now," he croaks, "I'll never stop." He struggles to breathe, then asks, "What do they call you?" "Spartacus." "Spartacus," he repeats. "I heard your name in the yard. They say you fight with purpose." Spartacus doesn't answer. "If you stay long enough," the man continues, "you'll learn what I have. Men like us don't belong on our knees. We don't survive by pleasing masters. We survive by ending them." His hand grips Spartacus's wrist with surprising strength. "This place is a spark," he whispers. "All it needs is someone willing to light the fire." He coughs, a wet, painful sound. When it passes, his grip loosens, his eyes slip closed. Spartacus watches his chest rise and fall, slow, uncertain. He leaves the infirmary with his own chest tight, like something inside is pressing against his ribs, trying to break out. That night, sleep doesn't come. He lies on his back, staring at the ceiling, hearing the echoes of the day, the crack of the whip, the man's voice, "I submit to no one." Varro's fear, the doctor's resignation, Batiatus's boredom, all of it swirling, condensing into a single burning thought. This system isn't just cruel, it's wrong, and wrong things, eventually, break. Spartacus sits up, his chains clink softly. In the cell across from him, Varro stirs. "Can't rest again?" Varro asks. "Tell me something," Spartacus says. "If Rome never lets you buy your freedom, if every fight, every scar still ends with you dying in the sand, would you still keep fighting?" Varro is silent for a long time. "I fight for my boy," he finally says, "for a world he might get to live in." "What if the only way to give him that world," Spartacus says slowly, "is not by fighting for Rome, but against it?" Varro sits up now, eyes searching Spartacus's face. "You're talking like a man who wants to be crucified." "I'm talking like a man who's tired of dying on someone else's terms." From the shadows, another voice cuts in, low, rough. "Crixus." "Careful, Thracian. Walls in this place have ears." Spartacus turns toward him. "You've never wanted more than this?" Crixus snorts. "I want to be the greatest champion Rome has ever seen. I want them to chant my name long after I'm gone." "And when you're gone?" Spartacus asks. "What changes?" Crixus doesn't answer. "Because they all know the truth. Rome will keep the games, keep the chains, keep the blood flowing, unless someone stops it." Spartacus lies back down, but he's not the same man he was that morning. The Ludus hasn't just trained his body, it has woken something in his mind. Not just anger, not just grief, intention. Somewhere in the darkness, the spark catches, and soon Rome will feel the heat. Every rebellion begins as a thought. Theirs begins as a question. What if we just didn't obey? The thought sits in Spartacus's mind for days, sharp and restless. It follows him through drills, through meals, through restless nights. He watches the guards more closely now, their routines, their blind spots. He notes which doors stay locked, which ones don't fully latch. Rome trained him to see weakness in an opponent. It never meant for him to look at the walls. One afternoon, a storm rolls in over Capua. Thunder grumbles in the distance, low and impatient. Dark clouds spread above the Ludus, swallowing the sun. Rain begins as a whisper, then builds to a solid sheet, pounding the tiles, turning dust to mud. The men huddle under the colonnades of the yard, grateful for even this small break from training. Guards curse as their armor gets soaked. Varro nudges Spartacus, following his gaze. "You're thinking again," he says. "Nothing good ever happens when you start thinking." "Storms are good," Spartacus answers. Storms make noise. Noise hides things. He nods toward the outer wall. A side gate, the one slaves use to bring in supplies, shudders in the wind. The bottom hinge is loose. The lock is old. One good hit from enough men at once. Varro follows the line of his sight. His jaw tightens. "Don't," he says softly. "You know what will happen if we try and fail." "I know what happens if we never try," Spartacus replies. The rain intensifies, turning the yard into a blur of gray and motion. In the distance, a bolt of lightning splits the sky. The crack of thunder that follows shakes the ground. Spartacus smiles a little. "Seems the gods are making noise for us." The plan, when it comes, isn't grand. It isn't a masterpiece of strategy. It's simple, desperate, beautiful in its recklessness. Kitchen knives. Training weapons sharpened in secret. A stolen key. 20 men who've had enough of kneeling. They meet in whispers, during meal lines, in the baths, passing in narrow corridors. A phrase repeated quietly. "When the sky is loud, we move." Crixus listens, arms crossed, doubting and furious. "You'll get everyone killed," he says. "Probably," Spartacus answers, "but not all at once, not for nothing." He looks Crixus in the eye. "Or do you plan to grow old in chains and have your name chanted over someone else's grave?" For a long moment, Crixus says nothing. Then he grinds his teeth. "If we do this," he says, "we do it to win, not to die dramatically." "Agreed," Spartacus says. "We don't die on their terms. Not anymore." Varro shakes his head, torn. "You're both insane," he mutters. "And I'm even worse for agreeing to this." The night they choose is heavy with heat. No breeze, no moon. Clouds crawl slowly across the sky, smothering the stars. The air feels thick enough to chew. Men toss and turn in their cells, sweat-soaked and restless. Spartacus sits on the edge of his bunk, chains loose around his wrists. His heart is steady. He hears the first distant rumble of thunder. That's the signal. He stands, moves to the bars, and taps twice. Soft, deliberate. Across from him, Varro answers with 2 taps of his own. Down the row, others respond. A chain of quiet agreement. The storm rolls closer. Lightning flashes, turning the world white for an instant. Thunder follows, loud enough to rattle stone. The guards grumble. Some pull their cloaks tighter. One disappears toward the kitchen, likely seeking wine or shelter. Perfect. When the bolt hits close enough to shake dust from the ceiling, Spartacus moves. Varro slides the thin, sharpened sliver of metal from its hiding place inside his mattress. They'd stolen it days before from the armory. A broken blade, useless in the arena, perfect in a lock. Hands steady despite the pounding in his chest, Spartacus works on the cell door. The old mechanism protests, stubborn from years of rust and neglect. Another flash, another crash of thunder. The lock gives. The door swings open with a soft, miraculous click. He steps into the corridor, feeling the air differently now, not as a prisoner, but as something else. This is what breathing feels like when it means something, he thinks. Varro squeezes his shoulder. "No going back now," he whispers. "There was never a way back," Spartacus answers. "Only forward." They move down the hall, unlocking cells as they go. Some men hesitate when their doors swing open. Others step out without a word, eyes already hard with resolve. Crixus joins them, rolling his shoulders, a grim smile on his face. "If this fails," he mutters, "I'm haunting you." "If this fails," Spartacus says, we'll be too dead to notice. The first guard doesn't even see it coming. He's sitting on a stool by the corner, head nodding, more asleep than awake. The storm has lulled him into carelessness. Spartacus is on him in 3 steps, one hand over the mouth, the other driving the sharpened fragment into the soft spot beneath the jaw. The guard spasms, then slumps silently. Spartacus eases him to the floor. The men behind him watch. This is different from the arena. No crowd, no cheers, no rules, just necessity. They strip the body quickly. Sword, keys, helmet. Each piece of stolen armor feels like another brick taken from Rome's wall. Further ahead, another guard rounds the corner. This one sees them. His eyes widen. "Hey!" Crixus barrels into him like a charging bull, blade flashing. The man falls, throat opened, words dying with him. Varro swallows hard. "We're really doing this," he whispers. From somewhere near the main yard, a shout rises. Someone has spotted something. The storm roars above them. No more stealth. "To the gate!" Spartacus shouts. They run. The side gate looms ahead, just as Spartacus remembered. Old iron, tired from years of wind and neglect. 2 guards stand before it, startled by the sudden appearance of armed slaves sprinting out of the dark. For a second, no one moves. Then everything happens at once. Varro hurls a stolen spear. It catches one guard in the chest, knocking him back into the gate with a sickening thud. Crixus doesn't slow down. He crashes into the second guard, smashing him into the wall, blade punching into his side. Spartacus reaches the gate, fumbling for the keys with slick, bloody fingers. Thunder crashes again, shaking his ribs. The key jams, slips, then finally turns. The gate groans, as if offended, and begins to open. On the balcony above, a voice shrieks. "Batiatus! Stop them! Stop them, you useless dogs!" More guards pour into the yard. Archers scramble onto the upper walkway, drawing bows. Spartacus turns, chest heaving. "Now!" The first wave of gladiators rushes the approaching guards, colliding in a frenzy of steel and desperate strength. Spartacus grabs Varro's arm. "Get through the gate! Take as many as you can!" "Not without you," Varro snaps. "This isn't about me," Spartacus says. "It's about not dying in here like Drusus. Go!" Varro hesitates, then nods, shoving men toward the opening, pushing, dragging, yelling. Crixus fights like a man born for this moment. Each strike is a promise kept. Each kill a sentence served back to Rome. Spartacus moves to his side, blades flashing in rhythm. For once, they're not rivals. They're a storm. Arrows whistle down from above. One slams into the dirt inches from Spartacus's foot. Another grazes a man's shoulder, spinning him to the ground. "We can't hold them!" someone shouts. Spartacus glances back at the gate. Men are spilling out into the storm-drenched night. Dozens of them, maybe more. Free. Lightning splits the sky again, turning everything stark and bright. He meets Crixus's gaze. "Time to go," Spartacus says. "Finally," Crixus growls. "I was starting to enjoy this." They begin to fall back toward the gate, fighting every step. A guard lunges at Spartacus. He sidesteps, disarms, and sends him into the mud. As he crosses the threshold, Spartacus looks back, just once. The yard, the cells, the balcony where Batiatus screeches orders, robe soaked, face twisted with rage. This place tried to turn him into a beast. Instead, it forged something else. "You should have killed me when you had the chance," Spartacus says under his breath. Then he turns and runs into the storm. The night swallows them, Spartacus, Varro, Crixus, and scores of others, shackles clanking, hearts pounding, feet pounding wet earth. Behind them, the Ludus of Capua burns with torches and fury. Ahead of them, the hills rise dark and unknown. They are no longer property, no longer performers. They are something Rome did not plan for. An army in the making. The first night of freedom doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like running. Bare feet slapping against wet earth. Breath burning in lungs. Branches clawing at skin. The storm chases them up into the hills, washing away their tracks, their sweat, their blood. By the time the rain eases, the sky is turning a sickly gray. Dawn. They collapse in a pocket of rock and scrub, half cave, half shelter, high above the road that leads back to Capua. Spartacus stands near the edge, chest heaving, hands on his thighs. For the first time since he was taken, there are no walls around him, no bars, no gates waiting to close, just open land. He doesn't smile. Freedom, he realizes, isn't just the absence of chains. It's what you do next. Behind him, the others try to catch their breath. Some are laughing in wild disbelief. Others are shivering, the adrenaline fading and the cold settling in. A few stare blankly, as if the ground might open and swallow them back into Rome's grasp. Varro drops heavily onto a rock. "We did it," he says, more to himself than anyone. "We actually did it." Spartacus looks around at the exhausted, wounded, hungry men. "No," he says quietly, "we started it." The first problem is food. These men have burned through everything they had running through the night. They're gladiators, strong, trained, but also dependent on the regular rations of the Ludus. Out here, Rome doesn't feed them. The second problem is weapons. Half of them still carry stolen swords or spear shafts. The rest have only chains, sticks, or nothing at all. The third problem is the biggest. Rome. They all feel it, like a storm building just beyond the horizon. The Ludus will send riders. Capua will send soldiers. Eventually, the Senate will send legions. They don't have years. They have days. Maybe less. Crixus limps over, wiping dried blood from his mouth. "We need to move deeper into the hills," he says. "Find caves. Hide. Let Rome tire itself out." "Hide and what?" Spartacus asks. "Wait to be hunted? Picked off one by one?" "We're alive," Crixus snaps. "That's more than we were yesterday. Don't throw it away on some fantasy of war." Varro looks between them. "What are you thinking, Spartacus?" Spartacus studies the valley below. Fields, roads, villas, tiny dots of people moving through their day, unaware that a group of escaped gladiators is watching from above. "Rome has always taken from us," Spartacus says slowly. "Our homes, our families, our lives. If we want to survive, we can't just run from Rome." He turns to face them. "We have to take from it." The first raid is small. A farmstead, 2 storehouses, a handful of guards more used to whipping slaves than fighting trained killers. They hit at dusk. Crixus leads the charge, smashing into the front line like a battering ram. Spartacus and Varro flank, cutting down the ones who try to run. The fight is quick, brutal, over before the sun is fully down. They take grain, dried meat, water, blankets, tools, anything useful. The slaves who lived on the farm watch in shock as their masters are tied up and left in the dirt. Spartacus steps forward. "You can stay," he says, voice carrying over the crackling of a burning barn. "Keep working. Wait for Rome to replace the men who owned you, and hope the next collars they put on you are lighter." He nods toward the hills. Or you can come with us. Some don't move. Fear is a heavy chain, even when the iron one is gone. But one woman, her hands still raw from years of work, steps forward. Then a boy. Then 3 more men. By the time they leave, a dozen new faces march with them into the dark. The next raid is bigger. A supply caravan heading toward Capua, wagons loaded with wine, oil, and grain, escorted by a small detachment of soldiers. Spartacus uses what Rome taught him. He studies terrain, chooses a narrow pass, positions men on both sides. Rocks tumble. Horses panic. The escort never has a chance. When the dust settles, more slaves stand free, blinking in stunned disbelief at the man who cut their bonds. "What do we call you?" one asks. Spartacus hesitates. Back in the arena, his name was something the crowd shouted for entertainment. Here, it becomes something else. "Call me what you like," he says. "Just remember that no man belongs in chains." Word begins to spread. In the taverns, in slave quarters, in whispered rumors along dusty roads. A Thracian gladiator has broken out of Capua. He's freeing slaves. He's building an army. As their numbers grow, so do the arguments. Around the campfire one night, the tension finally cracks. "We should head north," Varro says, tracing a rough map in the dirt with a stick. "Through the mountains, over the Alps, beyond Rome's reach." "Run?" Crixus scoffs. "We finally have weapons and men, and your first thought is to leave?" Others murmur in agreement or doubt. Spartacus listens, expression tight. "Out there," Crixus points toward the shadow of the lowlands, "are cities fat with Romans who've never seen a blade up close. We can bleed them, make them fear the slaves they've whipped their whole lives." Varro shakes his head. "And when the legions come? When 10,000 trained soldiers catch us in the open? Courage won't stop a spear in the gut." The camp goes quiet. All eyes turn to Spartacus. He looks at the faces around the fire. Men who once fought against each other for the crowd's amusement, now bound together by something stronger than chains. "Varro is right about one thing," he says. "We can't fight Rome in the open and win. Not yet." He pokes at the dirt map, drawing small circles around roads and towns. "But Crixus is right too. If we just run, Rome will hunt us to the ends of the earth. We need time. We need more people. We need—" The word tastes strange in his mouth. "Strategy." He looks up, eyes catching the firelight. "We hit them where they're weak. Convoys, isolated estates, small garrisons. We free slaves. We grow. By the time Rome understands what we are, we won't be a handful of escaped gladiators." He sweeps his hand to encompass the whole camp. "We'll be an army." A murmur rises. Fear, excitement, disbelief all tangled together. One of the new recruits, a former farm slave with rope burns still fresh on his wrists, speaks up. "What do we call this?" "Army." Varro laughs softly. "To Rome? We're not an army. We're a mistake." "No," Spartacus says. "We're a message." He looks toward the distant, unseen city, where the Senate sits on marble benches, blind to the fire growing in its foundations. "We are every man they thought would stay on his knees," he says. "We're the damned, the forgotten, the ones they thought they'd broken." His voice hardens. "Let them call us whatever they like. When they hear our name, I want them to feel fear." Crixus grins slowly. "Then let it begin." Over the following weeks, the hills become alive with whispers and shadows. Roman patrols vanish on familiar routes. Villas burn on the horizon. Slave chains are found empty on posts, swinging in the wind. In the caves and forests, the army of the damned learns to live as something new. They train, but not for show. They eat, but not from Rome's scraps. They laugh, but now the laughter isn't a shield. It's a weapon, daring the world to try and cage them again. Every night more people arrive, runaways, prisoners, men and women who heard the rumor and decided to bet their lives on it, on him. Spartacus feels the weight of that every time he looks around camp and realizes how many sets of eyes turn toward him when something needs deciding. He never asked to be a leader. But Rome made him a symbol, and now he intends to make that mistake hurt. At first, Rome laughs. Reports reach the city like gnats on summer air. Annoying, not dangerous. A handful of escaped gladiators near Capua. Some slaves raiding farms. Bandits in the hills. In the Senate, men in spotless white togas wave their hands and speak in polished Latin, more concerned with trade routes and elections than with whispers from the countryside. Send a praetor, one says, a few cohorts. It will be over by harvest. Far from Rome's marble and columns, on a rain-carved ridge in the south, Spartacus stands overlooking a valley littered with Roman shields. The battle was short, violent, final. A praetor came, just like they said he would. He brought men trained to enforce order, not to fight an enemy that knew the land and had nothing left to lose. Spartacus's army lured them into a narrow pass. Boulders rolled, spears rained down. When the Romans tried to form ranks, they found themselves attacked from three sides by men who moved like ghosts through rock and scrub. Now, the survivors, those allowed to live, stumble back toward the nearest town with a story Rome doesn't want to hear. A story about slaves who didn't run. A story about gladiators who didn't die on cue. Varro wipes blood from his cheek with the back of his hand, breathing hard. They broke, he says. Legionaries, real soldiers. They ran from us. They didn't run from us, Spartacus replies, watching the last of the Romans flee. They ran from the truth. Varro frowns. Which is, Spartacus's jaw tightens, that Rome is not a god. It bleeds. In Capua, the mood shifts from embarrassment to fear. In Rome, embarrassment turns to anger. Another force is sent, larger, better equipped, led by a man more interested in glory than caution. He expects an easy victory, a dramatic speech, a parade. Instead, he gets ambushed in the foothills. This time, Spartacus's army doesn't just attack from hiding. They meet the Romans in a field, half forest, half mud, and prove they can stand face to face. Crixus roars as he crashes into the Roman line, shield high, blade low, driving into the gaps like he was born for this. Former field slaves move with farm tools turned weapons. Ex-soldiers slip between ranks, cutting through armor straps, tripping shields, turning order into chaos. Spartacus moves through the melee like a shadow with purpose. Every slash, every block, every command moves them closer to something Rome forgot slaves could have: victory. When it's over, the field is a mess of bodies and broken standards. Roman eagles lie in the dirt for the first time in longer than anyone can remember. A captured soldier, young, too young, stares at Spartacus in horror. "This isn't possible," he mutters. "You're slaves." Spartacus kneels in front of him, eyes level. "No," he says. "We were slaves. Now we are what Rome made us." In Rome, the Senate finally stops laughing. The rumors changed shape. They defeated a praetor. They defeated two. They took Roman standards. Their numbers? No one knows how many there are now. In dimly lit rooms, men with power whisper to each other, voices low, as if the walls themselves might carry their words south. This Spartacus is not just a runaway. He's a symbol. Symbols are dangerous. One senator, old enough to remember other wars, slams his fist on a table. "You made this possible," he growls. "You built a world on backs you thought would never straighten. Now those backs carry swords." They argue over who to send next. Which general? How many legions? How much money? All the while, Spartacus's army grows. In the hills, life becomes something like order. They carve a camp into the landscape. Ditches, sharpened stakes, watchposts. Not permanent, never permanent, but sturdy enough to hold for a while. Tents made from stolen cloth and patched leather dot the slope. Cook fires smoke into the morning air. The sound of clashing steel fills the day as men and women who once knew only plows and chains learn to hold spears and shields. Spartacus walks among them, not as a king on a throne, but as one of their own. He corrects a stance here, adjusts a grip there, listens to their stories when the sun sinks low. One evening, he stops to watch a group of former house slaves practice with short swords. Their cuts are sloppy, their footwork clumsy, but their eyes burn. A woman lowers her blade, chest heaving. "I used to polish silver plates for a man who never learned my name," she says. "Now I'm learning his language." She raises the sword again. This speaks louder. Spartacus smiles, not with joy, but with something like pride. "Keep learning," he says. Rome is going to listen. Not everyone shares his vision. Around one fire, Crixus slams a fist into the dirt. "We've got enough men," he snarls. "Enough steel, enough rage. Let's march on the nearest city and tear it down stone by stone." Varro shakes his head, tracing lines in the dirt with a stick. Roads, rivers, towns. "They'll crush us in the open," Varro says. Spartacus is right. We hit and move. We don't give Rome the fight it wants. Crixus snorts. "Since when do we care what Rome wants?" Spartacus listens, gaze moving between them. "I don't care what Rome wants," he says. "I care what my people need. And right now, they need time, training, food, hope." He rests a hand on Crixus's shoulder. "There will be a day when we face them head-on, but not on their terms. On ours." Crixus pulls away, unconvinced, but not leaving. Not yet. Far to the north, a messenger on a blown, sweating horse reaches a Roman outpost. His words tumble out, terrified. "They're everywhere," he gasps. "They strike, vanish, and strike again. Villas burned, roads unsafe, citizens afraid to travel. The slaves, they watch us now, in the fields, in the streets, like they're waiting for a sign." The officer in charge grips the edge of his table until his knuckles whiten. In the distance, thunder rumbles, not from the sky, but from the slow, deliberate march of change. Rome has always ruled by fear. Now, for the first time, it feels fear looking back. On a clear night, under a sky thick with stars, Spartacus stands alone at the edge of camp. Below, scattered across the dark land, small pinpricks of fire mark villas, towns, Roman outposts, a web of light and power. Behind him, his own camp glows. Fewer fires, less grand, but alive with something Rome's world has forgotten. Defiance. Varro joins him, quiet. Do you ever wonder, Varro asks, how this ends? Spartacus doesn't answer right away. Every night, he says finally, in 1,000 different ways. None of them are easy. Varro chuckles weakly. You think we can really scare Rome? Spartacus looks back toward the north, toward the unseen city of marble and iron. I don't need Rome to be scared, he says. I need it to understand one thing. Varro glances at him. What's that? Spartacus's eyes harden. That the people it chained have learned to fight standing up. He turns back to the camp, to the men and women sharpening blades, bandaging wounds, sharing stolen bread, and shared courage. For the first time in its long, brutal history, Rome feels something shake beneath its feet. Not from an earthquake, from the march of those it once called less than human, now moving as one. War gives and war takes. For weeks, all it has done is give Spartacus one thing: momentum. More raids, more freed slaves, more Roman patrols smashed and sent back limping toward their commanders. His army swells with faces and accents from all over the empire. But victories don't fill the quiet spaces. At night, when the camp settles and the fires burn low, Spartacus feels something else creeping in around the edges of his thoughts. Not fear, not doubt, emptiness. He has purpose. He has a cause. But he does not yet have a life. It changes the day they free a roadside work crew. The Romans had them building a new stretch of road, straight, gray, and merciless, the kind of road legions march on when they come to crush rebellions. Spartacus decides they won't get that far. His fighters descend from the hills at dawn, moving through the mist like ghosts. The soldiers barely have time to form a line before the first wave hits. The skirmish is short, brutal. When it's over, the overseers are tied to the very posts they once chained others to. The workers, thin, sunburned, their backs a map of old scars, stand in a loose, stunned cluster, staring at their broken shackles. Among them is a woman with dark hair braided tight against her neck, eyes sharper than the tools she's been forced to swing. There's blood on her lip, but she stands straighter than most of the men. Spartacus steps forward. "You're free now," he says, "if you want to be." Some of the workers look toward the horizon, fear and habit dragging their gaze back toward Rome. But the woman meets his eyes directly. "Free to what?" she asks. "To starve on the side of the road instead of working on it?" Her voice isn't defiant exactly. It's tired, honest. Spartacus nods slowly. "Free to choose," he says. "Stay here. Try to disappear. Or come with us. Fight. Take from the people who took from you." She studies him, the camp, the men cleaning blades, the captured soldiers held under watch. "What do they call you?" she asks. "Spartacus." "I've heard that name," she says, in whispers, in prayers. She wipes the blood from her lip with the back of her hand. "My name is Mira," she says. "And I'm tired of praying." She steps out of the group and joins his side. Just like that. Mira is not like the others. She doesn't ask for rest. She doesn't ask for special treatment. On the very first night in camp, she sits by the fire with a whetstone, sharpening a sword someone else discarded as too nicked. Varro watches her for a while, then leans toward Spartacus. "She's dangerous," he says lightly. "You can tell by the way she sharpens that blade, like she's imagining a neck." Spartacus almost smiles. Maybe that's what we need more of. Later, Mira joins the training circle. Crixus snorts when he sees her pick up a spear. "You'll hurt yourself," he says. Not as badly as I plan to hurt them, she replies, spinning the shaft with surprising grace. She's clumsy at first. Everyone is. But there's a precision to her movement, a focus that Spartacus recognizes. That night, he corrects her grip. Hands a little lower, he says, stepping behind her. You're fighting the weight. Let it work with you. She adjusts, tries the thrust again. The spear point thunks into a straw dummy with satisfying force. Better? He nods. She glances back at him. You're used to people doing what you say, she teases. I'm used to people dying when they don't, he answers, half joking, half not. Her smile fades a little. She studies his face in the firelight. Is that all you see when you look around this camp? She asks. Potential deaths? Spartacus hesitates. Some days. Mira nods once. Then, you carry too much. Time has a strange rhythm in war. Days blur together in sweat and steel and marching. Nights stretch long, filled with quiet conversations and the rustle of men turning in their sleep. Slowly, almost without planning it, Spartacus finds himself seeking out Mira in the spaces between battles. She was born to a small farming village, she tells him, far from any city. Rome was just a word back then, something you cursed when taxes came due, something you feared when soldiers passed through. Then one harvest went bad. Taxes didn't. Her father argued. Rome answered with fire. They took everything that would burn, she says, staring into the flames. Then they took everything that wouldn't, including us. Spartacus listens. He doesn't offer empty words. His own story is carved from the same stone. Land taken, freedom stripped, forced to serve the machine that broke him. For the first time in a very long time, he's talking to someone who understands without needing every detail. There are small moments, fragile and rare. A shared laugh when a green recruit trips over his own sword belt. A quiet meal on an overlooking ridge as the sun bleeds gold over the hills. A brief, stolen second in the chaos of camp where their hands brush and neither pulls away. Varro notices. Careful, he tells Spartacus one night. The gods don't like it when men at war get happy. They get jealous. Spartacus shakes his head. I'm not happy, he says. Varro smirks. You're less miserable. That's how it starts. The cost comes, as it always does, wrapped in the illusion of control. They attack a minor Roman outpost, a garrison that's been harassing nearby villages, collecting extra taxes with the edge of a blade. It should be simple. In, out, fires lit, supplies taken, lesson taught. Spartacus divides the forces. Crixus leads the charge at the front gate. Spartacus and Mira take a smaller group to circle behind, cutting off any escape. The plan works, at first. The front gate falls faster than expected. Roman soldiers stumble in half-dressed, dragged from sleep into chaos. Spartacus's group hits the rear just as ordered. They cut down the few guards who manage to form ranks. For a moment, victory feels close enough to touch. Then the horn sounds. Not from the outpost, from the trees. A second Roman detachment, hidden and waiting. A trap they never saw coming. Arrows whistle from the dark. One of Spartacus's men drops with a cry, an arrow in his neck. Another takes a shaft in the thigh and crumples. Ambush! Someone shouts. The fight turns. Not clean, not on their terms. Spartacus hears the shift, the tone of the battle changing from controlled violence to raw survival. He scans the chaos, looking for something, anything. He finds Mira. She's holding the line near the edge of the tree line, spear flashing, teeth bared in a snarl. A Roman soldier lunges at her. She sidesteps, drives her spear into his gut, yanks it free. She sees Spartacus across the field and gives him the quickest of nods. Then another volley of arrows rains down. Spartacus ducks behind a broken cart. The thuds of arrows hitting wood ring in his ears. When the noise fades, he looks up. Mira is no longer standing. She's on her knees, hand pressed to her side where an arrow juts out, dark with blood. Everything else disappears. He sprints toward her, cutting through anyone who steps in his way. The battle becomes a blur of red and sound, his focus narrowed to the spot where she's struggling to stay upright. He reaches her, dropping to his knees. "Mira!" She looks up, eyes unfocused at first, then sharpening as they find his face. She tries to laugh, but it comes out as a broken breath. "Took your advice," she manages. "Let the weight work with me. Just not the way we planned." He presses his hand over the wound, feeling the hot, impossible rush of blood. "Stay with me," he says, voice harsher than he intends. "We're getting you back to camp. The healers—" She shakes her head. "Spartacus," she whispers. "You know as well as I do. Some wounds don't close." Around them, the battle rages. Crixus roars orders. Varro shouts for a retreat. Somewhere, a Roman horn calls a desperate regroup. Spartacus hears none of it. "We were supposed to have more time," he says. Her hand finds his wrist, grips tight, smearing his skin with her blood. "You gave me more than I had," she says. "You gave me a choice." Her gaze softens, tears mixing with sweat and dirt. "Promise me something. Anything. Don't let this—" She coughs, winces, forces the words out. "Turn you into the thing you're fighting." It's a simple request, impossible and necessary. Spartacus's throat tightens. "I promise." Her fingers relax. For a heartbeat, her eyes stay on his, then slip past him, looking at something he can't see. Her body sags. The battle noise rushes back in like a wave. Spartacus doesn't scream, doesn't weep. His face goes very still as he gently lowers her to the ground, closing her eyes with a hand that has held too many dying faces. Varro reaches him, panting, blood on his arm. "We have to move," he shouts. "We've won, but more could be coming. Spartacus!" He sees Mira. The words die on his tongue. For a long second, Spartacus doesn't move. Then he stands, slow and deliberate. "Pull everyone back," he says, voice flat. "Burn their supplies. Take their weapons. Leave their dead." Varro nods and runs off, barking orders. Spartacus stands alone in the center of the wreckage, the air thick with smoke and the smell of iron. War has given him comrades, a cause, an army. For a brief, fragile moment, it gave him something like love. Now, it has taken that too. The part of him that wanted peace, that dreamed of a life after this, shrinks into something hard and distant. He looks up at the sky, a sky that doesn't care. "You took her," he murmurs, "to Rome, to the gods, to fate itself." "All right." His eyes harden into something colder than before. "Then I'll take everything from you." Grief doesn't stop a war. It sharpens it. In the weeks after Mira's death, Spartacus moves like a man carved from stone. He eats when reminded, sleeps only when exhaustion forces him. But when it comes to planning, to drilling, to striking Rome, he is more focused than ever. The raids grow bolder. They don't just hit farms and supply wagons now. They strike at fortified depots, tax stations, small towns where Roman law once felt unshakable. Each victory sends a message. Each freed slave adds another voice to the chorus rising against the empire. Rome hears it. And this time, It answers with more than arrogance and underestimation. One evening, as the sun bleeds out behind the hills, scouts return to camp, faces hard, breathing fast. They're coming, one says, not just a praetor, not just a handful of cohorts, legions. The word hangs in the air like a shadow. Legions, the backbone of Rome. Professional soldiers, hardened by campaigns across continents, marching under eagle standards that have never known defeat on Italian soil. Varro spreads a rough map over a flat rock in the command circle. Reports say 2 full legions, he says, tracing their approach with his finger. 1 from the north, 1 from the east. Veterans. Not city guards, not garrison leftovers. Crixus leans on his sword, eyes burning. Good, he says. About time Rome sent someone worth killing. Some of the younger fighters cheer at that. Others go pale. Spartacus studies the map without speaking. He traces the hills, the valleys, the narrow passes they know and the Romans don't. They'll be heavy, he says. Infantry in tight formations. Heavy armor. Discipline. Varro nods. They'll expect us to scatter, to melt into the hills and run. Then we won't, Spartacus says. He looks up, eyes sweeping over the faces of his captains. We've spent months cutting at Rome's fingers. It's sending us its fist. We don't run from this. We break it. A murmur runs through the circle, half fear, half savage anticipation. They choose their ground carefully. Not a wide, open plain where Roman formations can roll forward like a steel tide. Not a cramped ravine where they can be trapped and crushed. A valley instead, broad enough to maneuver, narrow enough to control. Slopes on both sides, thick with scrub and rock. A shallow riverbed cutting through the center like a scar. Spartacus walks the ground for hours, silent, feeling the land under his feet. Here, they dig pits and cover them with branches. There, they position archers that Rome doesn't know they have. On the flanks, they hide the fastest fighters, the ones who can hit and vanish before a legionary can even turn his head. He's not trying to meet Rome on equal terms. He's trying to remind it that this is not a parade ground. This is a wound. The morning they arrive, the air tastes like iron. Dust plumes rise on the horizon long before the Romans are visible. The ground hums with the steady, relentless rhythm of thousands of boots in sync. Spartacus's army lines the valley. Ragged armor, mismatched weapons, faces set. Some are ex-soldiers, standing once more in a formation they thought they left behind. Some are former house slaves, who have never faced a battle like this before. All of them know what waits at the other end of this day. Varro adjusts the strap on his shield. You can still change your mind, he tells Spartacus. Spartacus shakes his head. No, Rome has to see us stand. Not as shadows, as equals. Crixus grins, rolling his shoulders. Equals? I plan to be better than them. Then they see the first glint of sunlight on metal. The legions march in, red crests bright, armor gleaming. Standards rise above the sea of helmets, golden eagles catching the light. Trumpets blare, cold and precise. To the free slaves on the slopes, it looks less like an army and more like a machine. They look big, one whispers. So did the walls of the Ludus, another replies. We got past those too. The Roman commander rides to the front, flanked by officers. He surveys the valley, the rough lines of Spartacus's forces, and sneers. Animals in stolen armor, he mutters. We put them down the way we should have from the beginning. He raises his sword. Advance! The legionaries move as one. Shields lock. Spears angle forward. The red wave rolls into the valley with terrifying discipline. Spartacus stands at the front of his center line, feeling the tremor of their march. "Hold," he says quietly. Crixus cracks his neck. "You always make them come to you?" "Only when I want them to think they're winning," Spartacus answers. The distance closes. 200 paces. 100? 50? Spartacus drops his hand. Now! The first traps trigger. Hidden pits swallowed the front ranks, shields and bodies tumbling into spikes and confusion. Arrows hiss from the slopes, cutting into officers who suddenly realize this isn't a simple slaughter. The Roman line falters, but only for a heartbeat. "Close ranks!" the commander roars. They do. That's what legions are for, to turn chaos into order. Then Spartacus's flanks explode forward. Crixus leads the charge on the left, smashing into the exposed side of the formation. His fighters move with brutal precision, slamming shields, hacking at knees, driving wedges into the Roman wall. On the right, lighter units dart in and out, hitting like wasps. Stab, disappear, stab again, forcing the legionaries to turn, to split their focus, to fight enemies they can't pin down. In the center, Spartacus waits until the exact moment the Roman line begins to stretch too thin, then surges. The clash is thunder, steel on steel, shield on shield. Voices rising, shouts, screams, prayers in a dozen languages. Spartacus feels the old rhythm of the arena return, the weight of a sword, the math of angles and timing. But now the stakes are multiplied by thousands. He drives forward, cutting down one soldier, then another. Beside him, Varro blocks a spear thrust meant for Spartacus's ribs, grunting as the impact jars his arm. "You owe me a drink," Varro gasps. "You can have a barrel when this is over," Spartacus snaps back. "If they live." On the ridge, the Roman commander watches, fury building as his legions fail to simply crush this rabble. "Commit the reserves," he snarls. "Push them back. I want Spartacus's head on a spike by dusk." Fresh cohorts move in, a second wave of iron crashing into a line that's already straining. For a moment, the momentum shifts. Spartacus feels it. The ground under his feet seems to tilt. Men stagger. The line bends. "Hold!" he roars, voice cutting through the chaos. "Hold the line!" A standard wavers, starts to tip. Crixus sees it and fights his way toward it, bellowing like a man possessed. He plants his feet, lifts the falling banner, and roars to the men around him. "We've bled too much to break now. If you run, you die tired. If you stand, you might live." Something steadies. The line stops bending. Then, slowly, impossibly, it pushes back. Hours later, the sun hangs low and angry in the sky. The valley is a graveyard waiting to be claimed. Bodies, Roman and rebel, litter the ground. Shields lie broken, standards snapped. Blood paints the rocks and riverbed. The Roman commander, realizing the tide has turned and his formations are unraveling, finally gives the order he never imagined he'd speak against slaves. "Retreat! Sound the retreat!" The horn blast is shrill, frantic. Spartacus hears it. He could chase them, drive them, cut down men running in panic. Instead, he raises his own hand. "Let them go!" he calls. "Let them carry the story home!" Some of his fighters stare at him in disbelief. Others, exhausted, are simply relieved to stop swinging their swords. Varro limps to his side, bleeding from a cut above his eye. "We had them," he says. "We have what we need," Spartacus replies. He looks over the valley, over the fallen eagles, the abandoned Roman armor. "We proved it," he says quietly. "Rome can meet us as an empire and not win." That night, the camp doesn't celebrate the way it did after earlier victories. They're too tired, too aware of the cost, too busy tending to the wounded and burying the dead. But there's something new in the air. Not just defiance, not just anger. Belief. Around the fires, men and women speak in hushed, awed tones. Did you see them run? Legionaries. Real legionaries. We stood. We didn't break. Spartacus sits alone at the edge of camp, looking up at the stars. He thinks of Mira, of Drusus, of the nameless boy whipped to death in the Ludus yard, of the countless others whose blood paved the road to this day. This battle doesn't end the war, but it changes it. Rome is no longer facing scattered slaves with stolen weapons. It's facing something it never wanted to admit could exist. A rival, an army born from its own cruelty, an empire of the broken, learning how to break back. There comes a point in every war when both sides know, not from a message, not from a speech, from the way the air feels, heavy, inevitable. For Spartacus, that moment comes on a cold morning as he stands on a ridge, looking down at the largest Roman force he has ever seen. Not 2 legions, not 3, an army. Standards bristle in the distance like a forest of spears. Tents stretch across the plain, white and orderly, as if Rome itself has decided to camp on his doorstep. Smoke rises from 100 fires. Trumpets call, crisp and disciplined. They've sent everything now, not just to defeat him, to erase him. Varro joins him, silent for a while. "We could still head for the mountains," Varro says finally. "Break into smaller groups, vanish. We've bled Rome. We've proven our point." Spartacus doesn't look away from the sea of Roman tents. "I didn't start this for a point," he says. "I started it for the men and women who believed there was something better than kneeling." He turns his head, looking back toward their camp, smaller, rough, carved out of necessity rather than design. Children play between the tents, their laughter too thin for this place. Women clean wounds, sharpen blades, share stories. Men mend armor that has already seen too much. "If we run now," Spartacus says, "Rome hunts them for the rest of their lives." Varro swallows. "And if we stay?" "Then we stop running," Spartacus answers. "Whatever comes next, we face it standing." That night, the camp doesn't sleep much. Some men lie on their backs, staring at the stars, silently bargaining with gods they never believed in before. Others talk too loudly, jokes coming out strained as they try to push fear away with noise. Spartacus walks among them, feeling their eyes on him like weight. At one fire, a former house slave polishes a dented helmet. "You think we can win?" he asks. Spartacus pauses. For once, he doesn't give the easy answer. "I think what we've already done matters," he says softly. "Rome will never forget this, even if it wants to." The man nods, strangely comforted by the honesty. Further on, Crixus sharpens his sword with slow, deliberate strokes. "Big day tomorrow," he says without looking up. "It was always leading here," Spartacus replies. Crixus's jaw flexes. "If I die tomorrow," he says, "I want it to be facing them, not running from them. They built an empire on our backs. Let them see our faces when we make them bleed." Spartacus rests a hand on his shoulder. "Die if you must," he says, "but not for revenge alone. Die for the ones who come after." Crixus gives a short, rough laugh. You always have to make everything bigger, don't you? Before dawn, Spartacus goes to the edge of camp alone. The world is still. The sky is a dark blue bruise, the horizon just beginning to pale. In that quiet, he speaks, not to gods, not really, but to memories, to Mira, to Drusus, to the nameless ones who fell without graves. If I fall today, he murmurs, let it mean something. Let it be more than a show. The first pale line of light cracks the sky. It's time. The two armies face each other on a broad, cold plain. On one side, Rome, disciplined, armored, rows upon rows of soldiers who've spent their lives training for this. On the other, Spartacus's army, less organized, less equipped, but not less determined. They've buried too many friends to be afraid of the cost now. Spartacus rides a stolen horse along the front line. He's not a king, not a general in polished armor. He's a man in battered gear, scars visible, eyes clear. He stops, turns his horse, so all can see him. You know who's out there, he calls. His voice carries across the line. Men who think they were born to rule this land. Men who think we were born to serve them. He points his sword toward the distant Roman standards. They call us slaves, criminals, animals. They say this is a rebellion. But look around you. He sweeps his gaze across the faces. Gauls, Thracians, Africans, Greeks, Italians. Once divided, now one. This is not rebellion, he says. This is remembrance. We're reminding Rome of something it forgot, that every man, every woman, every child it chained was human. He takes a breath. We may die here, he says, not sugarcoating it, not hiding. But if we do, we die on our feet. We die free. A murmur rises, then a roar. Crixus lifts his sword. Varro slams his shield with his fist. The army of the damned raises its voice one last time. The Romans move first. Trumpets sound. The machine activates. Cohorts advance, lines rippling forward with terrifying precision. Shields lock. Javelins come up. Spartacus raises his sword. Forward! They run. The distance between the two forces shrinks in heartbeats that feel like lifetimes. The first volley of Roman javelins falls. Men scream. Bodies hit the ground. The line stutters, but doesn't stop. Then the lines clash. It's nothing like the arena. There's no sand trying to soak up the scale of this. No neat pairings. No referees. Just chaos. Spartacus fights like a man who has nothing left to negotiate. His world narrows to the arc of his blade, the weight on his shield, the feel of the ground beneath his boots. A Roman lunges. Block, counter. Another swings. Duck, thrust. A third tries to flank him, but Varro is there, shield smashing the attack aside. Still owe me that drink, Varro grunts. Survive this, Spartacus says, and I'll buy you Rome's whole cellar. On the left, Crixus is a storm. He crashes into the Roman line again and again, rallying those around him with sheer force of will. They hurt you, he bellows. Hurt them back. The battle surges, ebbs, surges again. At one point, Spartacus finds himself pushed back, pinned near a fallen wagon. A Roman officer spots him, recognizes something in his stance, his presence. Spartacus! The officer shouts like a curse. He charges. Their swords meet with a crack that numbs Spartacus's arm. They trade blows, hard, fast, vicious. The officer is good, trained. Spartacus is better, forged. He feints left, draws the man's guard out of position, and drives his sword into the gap beneath the armor. The officer chokes, eyes wide, and falls. there's no time to feel satisfaction. A scream tears through the noise. Familiar. Varro. Spartacus whirls. Varro is down on one knee, a spear jutting from his side. Blood blossoms across his tunic. Spartacus fights his way to him, cutting a path through the press. He reaches Varro just as the man sags fully to the ground. "You always did." "Overcommit," Varro gasps, trying to laugh and failing. Spartacus drops beside him, hand pressing uselessly against the wound. "Stay with me," Spartacus says. "We've survived worse." "Not this one," Varro says, eyes dimming but still warm. "But listen." He grips Spartacus's wrist weakly. "Don't let this end with just death. Make it mean something." The words cut through Spartacus like a blade. "It already does," he says, voice rough. "Because you were here." Varro's hand falls away. His chest stills. The battle rages on. Spartacus stands slowly. Around him, his army is being pushed back, hacked apart, but never broken. They refuse to turn and run. Every step they give, they take blood for it. He raises his sword one last time. "With me!" he roars. He charges into the thickest part of the Roman line, not as a general now, but as the man he was in the arena. A fighter who knows the end is close and chooses to meet it head-on. Spears thrust, blades flash, pain blooms, sharp, then distant. He goes to one knee. The world tilts. He looks up and sees sky. Wide, blue, indifferent. Around him, the sounds of battle fade, replaced by distant echoes. Cheers from arenas long gone. The clash of training in the Ludus yard. Mira's laugh, Varro's jokes, Drusus's calm voice. He feels hands on him, rough, Roman, trying to strip his armor, finish him, claim a trophy. He doesn't hear their words. With the last of his strength, Spartacus pushes up, not to stand, but to look, to see his army still fighting, still refusing to kneel, even as they fall. He smiles, just a little. "We did it," he thinks. "We reminded them." Then, for Spartacus, the war is over. The empire will go on, for a while. But something in it has changed forever. Rome wins the battle. But victory tastes different this time. When the last sword falls silent, the plain is a grave written in iron and flesh. Roman soldiers stagger between bodies, faces smeared with sweat and dirt and disbelief. They expected slaughter. They got a war. The order comes down like a sentence. No burials for the rebels. No honors. No graves. Instead, they get something else. A warning. Days later, along the Appian Way, the great road that leads into Rome like a stone spine, wooden crosses begin to rise. 1, then 10, then hundreds, 6,000 in all, stretching mile after mile. On each cross, a body. Some already still, some still clinging to breath, eyes burned by the sun, lips cracked, hands nailed or tied above their heads. Travelers passing by cover their children's eyes. Some Romans smirk. Others look away quickly, as if afraid the sight might somehow be contagious. "This is what happens," a centurion says to his men, gesturing at the forest of crosses, "when slaves forget their place." But the faces on those crosses don't look like they've forgotten anything. They look like people who remembered too much. Somewhere among them, though none can say exactly where, hang the remains of the army Spartacus built. Men who once cheered in the Gladiator barracks. Women who once scrubbed floors in silent rage. Farmers who once bowed their heads when soldiers rode by. Now, their bodies hang above the very road they once walked as shadows. No plaque bears their names. No monument marks their stand. Rome doesn't build statues for those who made it bleed. And Spartacus. His body is never found. Some say he died in the crush of the final push, cut down and trampled like anyone else. Others swear they saw him fall and rise again, fighting on with wounds that would have killed any normal man. Stories spread. I saw him cut down 3 centurions before they finally brought him to his knees. No, my cousin told me he broke through the Roman line. That he vanished into the hills, that he's still out there. The truth is simpler and harder. He died the way he lived. Not as a ghost, not as a god, as a man. But Rome's failure to claim his corpse does something it never intended. It turns him from a rebel into a legend. Back in the city, life continues. Markets open, senators argue, chariots race in the Circus Maximus. For many, the slave war becomes just another chapter in Rome's long, bloody history. A problem solved, a threat eliminated. Yet something lingers. In the baths, voices lower when his name is mentioned. Spartacus, they whisper, the gladiator who made legions run. In wealthy villas, slaves serve wine with eyes carefully blank. But inside, the story they've heard in secret about a Thracian who broke his chains beats like a second pulse. In the Senate, some congratulate themselves. We have restored order. Others are less sure. One older senator, his hair more white than black, speaks quietly to a colleague as they walk past the forum. We crucified 6,000 men, he says. And yet, I fear we may have created something we can't hang on a cross. What's that? The other asks. The older man glances up at the Capitoline Hill, where Rome's temples gleam in the sun. An idea. Years pass. The crosses rot one by one, wood splintering, ropes fraying. Bones drop into the ditches by the roadside. Grass grows over them. Travelers forget exactly where the bodies fell. But the story doesn't rot with them. Soldiers in distant garrisons tell it over cups of sour wine. There was a time, they say, when an army of slaves beat us, when Rome had to send its best to put them down. In cramped insula, Rome's apartment blocks, poor citizens tell their children about the gladiator who refused to kneel. Not because they plan to rise up, because sometimes knowing it was possible once is enough to make the present feel less heavy. In slave quarters, the story changes shape. It becomes sharper, quieter, more dangerous, whispered in the dark. He came from nowhere, like us. He learned their ways and used them against them. He almost got us all out. For every voice that says he failed, another answers, no, Rome failed first. He just showed it. But the generals who defeated him go on to win elections. Parades, power. History carves their names onto marble. But marble erodes. And something strange happens over time. Their victories become footnotes. Their titles blur together. But his name? That stays sharp. Spartacus. Not a senator. Not a consul. Not an emperor. A man who started at the bottom of Rome's world and climbed high enough to shake it. And somewhere, far from Rome's marble and the Appian Way's dust, in a small village where children train with wooden sticks and run laughing across fields, an old woman sits by a fire. Scars cross her hands, old whip marks, half faded. A boy sits at her feet, eyes wide. Tell it again, he begs, the story of the gladiator. The old woman smiles, a little sadly. Once, she says, There was a man Rome tried to make into a beast. They caged him. They made him kill for their amusement. She looks into the fire, seeing not flames but sand and iron, and a pair of eyes that never quite learned how to bow. But he remembered he was more than that, she continues, and he reminded others. Even when he died, Rome could not forget what he made it feel. The boy frowns. But he lost, he says. The woman nods slowly. Yes, she says. On the battlefield he lost. But sometimes, she touches her chest. The first man through the gate doesn't win. He just shows everyone else that it can be opened. Outside, the wind moves through the fields. Far away, Rome's empire continues to rise and crack and shift. But the echo of chains breaking in a Capuan yard, of a voice shouting in a valley, of an army of the damned standing its ground, that echo refuses to fade. History is cruel in what it keeps and what it lets slip away. For all the blood spilled, for all the fear he carved into Rome's memory, we actually know very little about the real Spartacus. No letters, no speeches in his own words, no carved statue commissioned in his lifetime, only fragments, snapped lines from Roman historians who hated and feared him, scattered details from men who saw him not as a person, but as a problem. And yet, somehow, from those broken pieces, a shape emerges. We know he was Thracian, from the rugged lands north of Greece, where mountains breed soldiers and stubbornness in equal measure. We know he once served Rome as an auxiliary, fighting in its armies before he turned against them. We know he was sold into slavery, trained as a gladiator in Capua, and that he escaped with only about 70 men at his side. We know that tiny spark became a wildfire, an army tens of thousands strong. We know he beat Roman forces again and again, humiliating commanders who thought a slave with a sword would always be less than a citizen with one. We know Rome never really understood him. Some writers painted him as a brute. Others admitted he was intelligent, disciplined, even honorable, refusing pointless cruelty, sharing spoils with his followers, punishing those who preyed on the innocent. But who was he when no one was watching? Did he laugh easily? Sleep badly? Did he think of home? Of a woman? Of a life that might have been, as he stared into campfires before battle? History is silent on those questions, so we fill in the gaps with story. Because that's what humans do when the record runs out. We imagine our way to meaning. Rome tried to frame his revolt as a criminal outbreak, a temporary disturbance in the natural order, a glitch. But the scale of what he did refuses to stay inside that neat little box. He didn't just run. He didn't just hide. He turned the very thing Rome used to terrify the world, its military machine, back against it. He took gladiators, farmers, shepherds, miners, house slaves, men and women who had never been meant to stand side by side, and he turned them into something Rome had never planned for. A counter-argument written in steel. He didn't overthrow the Republic. He didn't march on Rome itself. But he did something more dangerous in the long run. He proved that the people Rome said were born to obey, could learn to command. Centuries later, when his crosses have long rotted away and Rome itself has fallen, his name refuses to stay buried. Revolutionaries in Europe invoke him as a symbol of the oppressed striking back. Workers' movements use his image, a broken chain, a raised fist, as a reminder that no system based on exploitation is truly invincible. In the modern world, His story becomes a kind of mirror. In America, you can feel it most clearly, a country that loves underdog stories, that cheers for the fighter who rises from nothing, that hates the idea of being told where it belongs. You see echoes of Spartacus in every tale of a nobody taking on a rigged system. In whistleblowers, in protesters, in people who walk off jobs that treat them like disposable tools. Very different stakes, very different worlds, but the emotional DNA is the same. You told me this was my place. I don't agree. Of course, it's easy, too easy, to romanticize him, to turn Spartacus into a clean, polished hero, a perfect freedom fighter, a flawless revolutionary. The truth, if we could see it up close, would be messier. His army wasn't a seminar on human rights. It was a desperate, volatile mix of fear, rage, hunger, hope, vengeance, and survival. They freed slaves, but they also killed. They burned villas. They terrified people who had never personally held a whip. War is never clean, and anyone who tells you otherwise is selling you either propaganda or a movie ticket. But that's exactly why his story matters. He wasn't a saint. He wasn't a monster. He was a man, caught between the instinct to survive and the instinct to say no more. That tension is the heartbeat of his legacy. Today, when we walk past monuments and museums, when we binge shows and movies about Rome, when we see the Colosseum on postcards and screensavers, it's easy to get lost in the aesthetic. The marble, the arches, the drama. But somewhere beneath all that stone and spectacle is a simple question Spartacus forces us to ask. What do you do when a system benefits from your silence? Do you bow, play along, try to grab a slightly softer collar? Or do you risk everything on the belief that you were meant for more than this? Spartacus answered that question with his life. He didn't live to see the world he might have wanted, but he cracked the illusion that Rome was untouchable. And in every era since, whenever someone looks up at power and says, "I may lose, but I will not kneel," a little of Spartacus walks with them. Close your eyes for a moment. Forget the sand. Forget the swords. Forget the roar of 50,000 Roman throats. Now, open them. To this arena. A glowing screen in your hand. A feed that never stops. An audience you will never fully see, but can always feel. We like to think we're nothing like Rome. We ended the games. We banned blood sport. We tell ourselves we're civilized now. But look closer. Rome packed human beings into a stone bowl and screamed for spectacle. We pack human beings into digital spaces and scroll for spectacle. Back then, they watched men fight animals, each other, the system. Today, we watch people fight algorithms, burnout, each other's opinions, the hunger for fame. Different weapons, same hunger. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most of us are not the crowd. We want to believe we are, the ones safely watching from up in the seats. But for a lot of people in the modern world, especially in America, we're closer to the gladiators than we'd like to admit. You clock into a job that would replace you in a week if it had to. You measure your worth in numbers you don't control. Views, likes, followers, sales targets. You're told to be grateful for opportunities that quietly drain you. You're trained to perform, to smile on cue, to keep going, even when something inside you whispers, "This doesn't feel like a life. This feels like a show." Rome called it the arena. We call it hustle, grind, content, different language, same pressure. So, What do we do with gladiators now that they're gone? We don't have to copy their violence, but we can copy their clarity. Gladiators knew three things very well. 1. They knew the game was rigged. They didn't pretend Rome was fair. They understood the system was built on their backs and wasn't going to apologize for it. 2. They built brotherhood anyway. They shared bread, shared wounds, shared jokes in the shadow of death. They created connection inside a machine designed to isolate. 3. Some of them refused to let the arena define them. Spartacus could have been the perfect product, a crowd-pleasing killer, a quiet asset. Instead, he became a problem. He looked at the walls and thought, what if the sand isn't the only place we can stand? That question changed history. Today, our chains are different. Some are metal, yes, prison bars, detention centers, but most are invisible. Debt, expectations, fear of not belonging, fear of losing the little we have. Sometimes the loudest arena isn't outside you, it's inside your own head. If I stop performing, who am I? If I walk away from this job, this relationship, this role, what's left? Those are gladiator questions. And maybe that's why the story of Spartacus still hits so hard. Because he didn't just fight Rome. He fought the version of himself that Rome wanted him to be. A weapon, a product, a good slave with excellent swordsmanship. He chose something else. Not because it was safe. Not because it was smart. Because it was true. So here's where this stops being ancient history and starts being about you. Look at your own life for a moment. Where is your arena? A job? A timeline? A family expectation? A reputation you're scared to lose? What are your chains? Not just the ones you can point at, the ones you feel in your gut when you're quiet long enough to listen. And the hardest question, what would it look like for you to step, even an inch, out of the role you were assigned, and into the person you actually are? For Spartacus, that step meant blood and war. For you, it might mean something quieter, but no less brave. Saying no to a job that eats your soul. Leaving a circle that only accepts the mask, not the real you. Creating something that might fail, but is finally honest. That's rebellion too. The Romans thought their games would last forever. They didn't. Our arenas won't either. Every time someone refuses to be just a product, just a metric, just a cog, every time someone chooses dignity over spectacle, another crack appears in the wall. So, as we close this journey, I'll leave you with two questions. The kind Rome never wanted its people to ask. In your own life, are you more like the crowd or more like the gladiator? If you had one Spartacus moment this year, one choice to say, I won't kneel to this anymore, what would it be? Tell me in the comments, what part of the gladiator story hit you the hardest? And what arena in your life are you thinking about differently now? Your answer might be the thing someone else needs to hear to realize. They're not alone in the sand.